Dog Works Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. You can support this podcast on patreon.com/Teamaneke.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to our daily coverage of the 2020 Iditarod here on DogWorks Radio and dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley, where we host shows all year long about mushing, Alex and I'm looking forward to doing that throughout the year. Make sure you follow us on social media by searching DogWorks Radio. And if you haven't already, it's not too late to hit that subscribe button, and you will get those episodes whenever we drop them. So I am joined today by my co-host, Alex Stein. Alex, how's it going?
It's going great, Robert. I'm sitting here drinking hot tea out of an Alaska mug, which is sort of where I was when the race began, when we had the ceremonial start a couple weeks ago. And it definitely seems like a totally different world now than it was then. But I am so happy that we have gotten through another Iditarod, not just for this podcast, but also for the race itself. It certainly has been an unusual year.
It has. It's been a long 2 weeks. This is our 17th day of coverage. And when we first started this, I was still out on the Serum Run Trail. You did the first couple of nights for me there. And it's amazing how the world has changed, as you said, since then. So we have a heck of a lot to talk about. This is our wrap-up show. This is one of my favorites that we do. Typically, we're doing this at about the same time that the banquet's going on, and we talk about who's winning all the awards and the raffles and all of that. But since that is not happening this year, we are going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to talk first off of the news of the day, and that is about what everybody's calling the Elam 11, who all finished today at around noon or so was the last one in. What do you know about those guys?
Yeah, so all 11 of them finished. Martin Boozer was sort of leading them when they came out of Elam. He was not the first of the Elam 11 to come in, but he came in with all 14 of his dogs. And that is kind of an amazing thing. The Elam 11 were sort of bookended by two rookies, Grayson Bruton, who was running the CV puppy team, and Casey Muringer, who we talked about. Actually, both of those we talked about as musher profiles during this Iditarod. But all of them came in. I was watching them live coming in on the over the internet, and the dogs all looked really amazing. There's a guy in Nome named Chad Benkart, who I believe is a pastor, and he was doing some live streaming of the finishes from across the street from the Nome Nugget, which I believe is in that church that is right there on Front Street. And so while the live stream camera on the Iditarod Arch was like stuck in one position and you could only see down the street, Chad was doing his live stream, and you could actually see the arch, and you could see the dogs when they came in and then when they left to go down to the dog lot. So that was a very wonderful thing. And at one point when I was watching his live stream, he had 900 people watching it. So thank you, Chad Benkart. It really made watching the last teams come in a treat.
And tell us about the Red Lantern winner. That's always kind of a special award, isn't it?
Yeah, so Casey came in and her parents were there, and they were holding up signs for her before she came in, and her dad was talking about how proud he was of her, and it was just a really wonderful thing. And then when she came in, of course, the Red Lantern musher gets to extinguish the widow's lamp, which is a different lantern that's hung on the burled arch, and that's one of my favorite traditions in Iditarod, is that the widow's lamp is lit and hung there when the race starts, and it stays there day and night. And then when the last musher comes in off the trail, they extinguish that, and that is the official end of the Iditarod race. And it's very cool. It goes back to traditions of leaving windows in Alaska roadhouses so that mushers could know where it was safe to come in and spend the night. And it also goes back to in New England when when women would put lanterns out on their houses when their husbands who were sailors were out at sea. So I've always really liked the widow's lamp, and it's always very touching to me when it's taken down and put out.
And we've talked in previous shows about the large star that you can see as you're heading out of Anchorage on the Glen Highway that they light sometime around Christmas time at the holiday season. They also turn that off when the Iditarod's over and when the Red Lantern crosses over the finish line. And that's kind of a changing of the seasons for everybody in Alaska, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I also noticed it was very interesting when Monica Zappa and Laura Neese came in. They were the only, we've talked a lot about coronavirus and about steps that are being taken and everyone being urged to minimize contact and not shake hands with people and not hug people. And pretty much everyone who came in was greeted with a hug or a handshake by Mark Nordman and by several other people. Monica Zappa and Laura Neese apparently are taking this perhaps a little bit more seriously than the other racers, because they both fist bumped everyone and did not, were very, very clear that they were not hugging or shaking hands with people.
Interesting. So what else do we have today?
So today, among other things, I wanted to mention that there is a guy named Miroslav Jakes, who is 69 years old. He's from Prague in the Czech Republic, and he completed a trip where he was walking from McGrath to Nome, and he came in to Nome just after the Red Lantern. And he started on February 20th out of McGrath, and I believe that is 600 miles or so.
Wow. Yeah, we were talking off air. When we were on the Serum Run expedition, we passed him right outside of Galena, about 10 miles outside of Galena. And I was with a snow machine buddy, and we stopped and we talked to him for a minute, and he told us a little bit about his trip. And what I found most interesting is he was towing this little sled behind him. It was about the size of a kid's sled, and that's all he had. He said he had a little tent in there and some food, and that was about it. And then I looked behind me at my gear sled that we were hauling on the snow machine, where I probably had 500 pounds of gear in that sled, and my partners, they had much, much more. But that guy was something else. If you could walk 600 miles in just a little over a month, you're doing something pretty special.
Yeah, and it's, we talk a lot about how the Iditarod Trail is a mixed-use trail, and there's other events that happen that take place on the trail, sometimes at the same time or around the same time. And it's just an amazing thing to think of someone having the the fortitude and the toughness to go out where it was, sometimes 40 or 50 degrees below zero without anything other than himself to get him forward.
Yes, for sure. So before we get into our favorite stories, or kind of the story of this year's race, do you have any other news you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I teased this on Twitter. And this is, I have very few superstitions, and I have very few things that I absolutely will not do, for superstitious reasons. But longtime fans of the show may realize or may remember that I do have one that is very important about the Iditarod. And that is, when the Iditarod is going on, I will never talk about the fact that there have been no dog deaths, because I don't want to jinx that and somehow cause there to be dog deaths. And this year, I am very happy to say that in the entire Iditarod, there were no dog deaths. And we've had a few years where there haven't been any dog deaths, but in the past, we've generally had like one or two per year. And it is definitely a testament to all of the mushers and all of the vets, especially, led by Chief Vet Stuart Nelson, that we have had a successful Iditarod where so many people came in under very difficult circumstances, and we had 0 dog deaths.
Yeah, that is something, like you said, it typically happens every year. Unfortunately, there'll be 1 or 2, and therefore a variety of reasons, and usually that causes quite a stir. But like you said before we went on air, I haven't seen a single story about this. Usually there is something said, either positive or negative, about that, and there hasn't been.
Right. And honestly, I think part of that is that everyone this year is getting out of Nome as soon as they can, and the banquet was canceled. So usually there would be some stories about that from the banquet. And, it's interesting too, because we started Iditarod with PETA claiming responsibility for Alaska Airlines pulling out as a sponsor, and then they claimed responsibility for the Anchorage Chrysler Dodge dealer pulling out as a sponsor a couple days later. And they, every year are hammering the Iditarod and saying how the Iditarod is horrible and cruel to animals and causes all of these dog deaths. And I think in any other year, the fact that there were no dog deaths would have been one of the top stories.
Yes. So my top story this year, and it's been one that we've talked about a little bit, especially in the early days, and that is the story of John Schandelmeyer taking over at the last minute. I have never seen that in all of the years that I've been following this race, probably 30 plus years. I've never seen anybody find out that he's running the Iditarod that technically he didn't plan for. When he woke up that morning, he had no idea he was doing, and he showed up on Sunday morning and said, yep, I can do this. I'm a dog man. There's no problems with that. He borrowed gear from all of his fellow mushers and handlers, and pretty much just kind of did a yard sale thrift store type wardrobe there in the parking lot, and then he jumped on the sled and took off down the trail. Unfortunately, he scratched. I guess he had quite a bug going through his dog team, which is pretty common on the Iditarod Trail. But there was a story today in the Anchorage Daily News about how he had to borrow, or actually he bought a watch from somebody at Yentna Station for $20, and he took off down the trail that way. He said there's no way in the world he could do a 1,000-mile race without having any idea what time it was. And little did he know that that watch was still on standard time. It was not on daylight savings time. So yes, he had a watch, but he was still an hour behind everybody else in terms of time, which I just thought was just kind of the icing on the cake to him getting ready and all of that. It just takes a special kind of guy to be able to just sort of jump on the sled and say, yeah, I can do 1,000 miles with no issue. And I thought that sort of shows the entire spirit of Iditarod, the entire spirit of mushing altogether. And by far, out of all the stories that we've talked about, of course, good, bad, and indifferent with coronavirus and, all the weather changes and all of that, that happens to be my favorite. Do you have another one?
Yeah, I like that one as well. But one of my favorites is a similar story, which is Shawn Underwood being called with 3 days' notice to run the Iditarod and running Jeff King's team. And that, that's it's similar in a lot of ways. It's a little bit different in that Shawn is a rookie and Shawn has never run a 1,000-mile race, and John Schneidermeyer has. Also, he had a little bit more time to prepare for it, but really not terribly much time. And I think that both of them really rose to the occasion. And sadly, neither of them finished. Shawn came very close, but was one of the 3 mushers who was airlifted out from just before safety. But I think both of them just did a really phenomenal job under very challenging circumstances.
Yeah, that is a good one for sure. And I have one more, and I bet you would probably agree with me on this, is sort of how the competitors act with each other along the trail. We see this every year of somebody helping out somebody else, and we could probably go back in our 10 years of archives, and we've talked about one of these stories every year. But this year, just like every other year, people have come together and helped out each other, and in particular the group in Elam, where they're helping out each other. But there's so many stories like that, and you would often think, especially big time sports fans would think, oh, I'm in this race to win it. I'm going to put the pedal to the metal and just rock and roll, and I'm not going to, I'm going to have my blinders on, and I'm going to be the first to know them. But that's not how this sport is. It usually is people helping each other down the trail, and that's what makes mushing special. Don't you agree?
I really do. And, even the very, very top mushers, the people who either have won the race or have been in the top 5 or have been in a position where they could have won the race, they won't overdrive their dogs. They won't push their dogs too much just to win. They know what their dogs are capable of, and they'll push their dogs to do that. But they also all know how much the dogs can do and how it doesn't make any sense to push the dogs beyond what their capabilities are. And we've seen multiple times when people push dogs too hard, sometimes dogs will just stop. Dogs will just quit. And it is amazing to me to see even someone like Jesse Royer, who I was hoping would win, but came in a very respectable third, or Mitch Seavey, who came in second. And they both were of the attitude of, I tried and the dogs just couldn't quite do it. And that's fine because they did great. And I never quite hear that kind of attitude in other sports. You hear people say, well, we could have tried harder. We could have pushed ourselves harder. But it seems like in mushing, maybe because it's not the athletic capability of the humans so much as of the dogs, that people recognize that there's so far that you can go, and beyond that, it's not going to help you.
Right. And another great example of that is the story with Lance kind of backing off just a little bit to let one of the rookies come in ahead of him. And I thought that was a really special story as well. Very much like we're talking about, that helping hand out there. And like we said, there are so many of those, and we could probably talk about one every year for at least the last 15 or 20 years for sure. So Alex, any other news or stories before we jump into our last profiles of the evening?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly mention that this year Martin Buser was the only person to come in with all of his dogs. So he finished with all 14 dogs. And, usually each year there are a couple people who will finish with all of their dogs. But given what he had to go through in Elam, it's kind of a remarkable thing. And it's also remarkable, I think, because he was running a puppy team. So there's a lot of things that you want to do when you're running a puppy team, but one of them is to give as many dogs as possible a great experience running, in most cases, their first really long race, so that they can go on to be like the superstars of the next few years. And so it would be impressive under any circumstance if he finished with all of his dogs, but it's especially impressive this year, and because it's a puppy team. And I saw a number of people say these dogs aren't puppies anymore. These dogs that Martin was running are like full-fledged Iditarod veterans now and ready to take on almost anything. This year he will, because he didn't finish in the top 20, he's not eligible for the Sepala Award, but it would not surprise me if he were given some other award for what he did this year, or possibly even some special award that is voted sort of on the fly.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see all of those awards when they're announced. And like we said last night, they're going to do something, whether they do it online or streaming or something like that. But I would imagine that it will be after a lot of the folks get home. And we were driving into town today, and we saw several of the teams that were heading back up north. We saw the Husky Homestead trailer heading up north. So they didn't stick around long with Shawn Underwood. He jumped on a plane, got back down here to Anchorage, and is already heading back up to the Denali area. And I saw on Twitter, it looks like Quince Mountain is already in Canada, so he's on his way home. And folks are moving and shaking to get away from any potential traveling hazards that they may come into contact with. So let's jump over to our musher profile. And tonight, we're not going to talk about one person. We're going to talk about a group, aren't we?
Yeah. So I thought it would be, given everything that's happened, I thought it would be good to look at all of the rookies this year. So rather than focus on one particular person, I wanted to just go and look at all of the rookies. So this year, and I'll go from front to back, Millie Porsild from Norway, whom we talked about on a previous show, was Rookie of the Year, came in 15th. She only had 6 dogs in harness when she came in, but they were 6 mighty dogs who looked great coming in. Tom Frode Johansen, who's also from Norway, came in 19th. He had 8 dogs in harness, and his kennel posted on Facebook afterwards, "We congratulate Tom on a well-executed Iditarod. He shows the smile of the Furaflatten," which we like to call him, and came into Nome as number 19, the second best rookie. He has completed the Yukon Quest, and in 2018, he completed the 20th Final Finland and the first edition of the FL 1200. And that means that there's a very small group of people who have completed the FL 1200, the Yukon Quest, and Iditarod. And one of the other notable people who has done that is Dallas Seavey. Grayson Bruton, who was running the Seavey puppy team, was the first of the Elam 11 to come in. He was 24th, and he had 11 dogs in harness. And like a lot of teams, they looked like they could turn around tomorrow and go another 500 or 600 miles without breaking a sweat. Riley Deich, whom we talked about previously as well, came in 26th. He had 9 dogs in harness. Deke Notgeboren was 28th, came in with 7 dogs in harness, looked really, really great. Fabio Berlusconi, whom we did not profile this year, came in 30th. He had 10 dogs in harness. The announcer in Nome decided not to try to pronounce his last name, which I think is relatively easy compared to some of them. So when he was coming down the front street, they just said, "Here comes Fabio," which made me laugh. I saw a post that apparently his visa expired 6 days ago. He will be trying to get back to Italy, and it's not clear when he'll be able to do that. And of course, conditions in Italy are not really great right now, so it might behoove him to stick around a little bit. Damon Ramaker finished 33rd with 11 dogs in harness. Looked really, really amazing and wonderful. And as we mentioned, Casey Muringer was 34th position. She took the red lantern and blew out the, or actually not blew out, but sort of turned the switch to extinguish the widow's lamp to end the race. Her parents had come into Nome, and they were chatting beforehand, and you could pick that up on the live stream, which was really cool. And they kept holding up signs for the Turtle Dove Express, which is what Casey referred to her dog team as. And those are the people who finished, but equally important are people who scratched or were withdrawn. Shawn Underwood, as we mentioned, was one of the people rescued by helicopter outside of safety. He had 10 dogs in harness, and Jeff King posted a photo of Shawn smiling, covered in snow, wearing a jacket that had the name Jeff King stitched over the pocket. And Jeff wrote, "This is the Husky Homestead Man of the Year." They also posted, Shawn was on Friday, Shawn was released from the hospital at approximately 4 p.m. He's doing well after getting some food in his belly and is getting a much needed and deserved rest. We can confirm that Shawn's team all arrived in Nome and were thoroughly checked by the ITC vets. They received a clean bill of health, ate and drank well before bedding down for a cozy nap themselves. And they also went on to thank everyone who helped with the rescue, including the ITC, the Alaska State Troopers, Nome Search and Rescue, Alaska Rescue Coordination Center, the Alaska Army National Guard. And they said, "We know there are more people that helped whose names we do not know, but we appreciate all that you do." And that's another thing that I think we talk about a lot on this show, but maybe this year with all the things going on, haven't had a chance to focus as much on, which is that there is an army of volunteers who come from literally all over the world. There's several thousand of them who volunteer their time up to 2 weeks, sometimes more than 2 weeks, to really make this race possible. And it's a pretty remarkable thing that all of these people want to come and do this, and many of them do it year after year and have done it for decades. Gabe Dunham scratched in Unalakleet with 12 dogs in harness. She posted on Facebook, "I found a little Wi-Fi and wanted to update everyone. I decided not to continue because the team caught a pretty serious bug, and I'm scratching in the best interest of the team. So Unalakleet is our finish line this year, and it's time to go home and recover, and I'll post more when I get home. I really want to thank everyone who helped and contributed to this race. It's a beautiful trail, and I'm so glad I got to run my dogs from coast to coast." Martin Massicott scratched in Galena, had 9 dogs in harness. And of course, Quince Mountain was withdrawn in Unalakleet. He had 14 dogs in harness. It is pretty clear that in a more normal year where we weren't facing down everything we're facing with the coronavirus, that he almost certainly would have been allowed to continue and almost certainly would have completed his race. He was having a little bit of problems with his own health early in the race, but had recovered and was doing really well, but just was a little bit farther behind than the race wanted. And as we talked about extensively a while ago, Mark Nordman is the guy who has to make these very difficult decisions. And I certainly wouldn't want to be in his shoes and have to do that. You always make people mad especially when you make a decision to withdraw someone. And so, I fall back to believing that he has a lot more information than we have as followers or fans of the race, and trusting that he is acting in good faith and making these decisions for the best of everyone. And I know from the way he's acted in the past that he does not want people to scratch. He would rather have people continue. He doesn't want to withdraw people, and often has tried to allow them to find ways to continue his race. So it's very sad. It's especially sad for me because Quince is just a remarkable guy, and a friend of mine. And as you mentioned, he and Blair are trying to get back to Wisconsin right now. They weren't sure that they would be able to drive through Canada because Canada has closed their borders to non-essential travel. But hopefully they are on their way and will get back to Wisconsin in a couple days. I know it's also been really disappointing for Quince's fans, the Ugly Dogs. Although I have to say that most of them that I have talked to have been overwhelmingly supportive of him and not blaming the race too much, although obviously they are disappointed. So that is the group of rookies. And I think it's important to say that as great as it is for the ones who finished and the ones who got their belt buckle and made it under the Burled Arch and Gnome, the ones who scratched and the ones who and Quince who was withdrawn are still absolutely phenomenal and amazing. It takes so much just to get to the starting line of Iditarod, and it is so much work and concentration and passion and sacrifice and money. And it's really important to me to express how much I respect and admire each and every one of these men and women. And they are just extraordinary. And it doesn't matter to me if they finished the race or didn't finish the race this time. Just getting there, just getting out onto the trail and going as far as they were able to go is something that, is kind of beyond what I think I will ever be able to accomplish. So I think that it's really important that we as fans acknowledge each and every one of these people. And, as we know, the rookies this year become the veterans and the people who move up to the middle of the pack and move up to the front of the pack. And everyone who has ever won this race has had a rookie year, and frequently had a rookie year that didn't really go all that well. So these are just extraordinary individuals, and I think we should pay tribute to them.
Excellent wrap up there with all of the rookies, and great words about paying homage to them for sure. Before we thank our fans and our listeners and supporters and all that, at the very beginning of the race, the new Iditarod CEO said, the Iditarod is looking for relevance. And they got that, didn't they, Alex? There was a heck of a lot of stories written this year about the sport. It was the only sport in town throughout the nation. And I think a heck of a lot of people were watching the Iditarod that never had before. And that can easily transfer over to our fans that we want to thank. This has been an awesome year for us. We've had a heck of a lot of people on our feed and our downloads. We've had the highest number of downloads that we ever had, and I think a lot of that can be equated to everybody's sitting at home. They're sitting on their self-quarantine, so they've found our show, and we've got a lot of great comments on Twitter and Facebook and email and every other place of people saying that they just found our show and they really appreciate it, and it's one of their highlights of the day. And that's the reason that we do it. It takes a lot of time and effort to do this every night, but we do it. We don't have a budget, and we're just doing it on our own. So we definitely want to give a shout out to all of our new fans for sure, and I think we've made some lifelong Mushing Radio fans in the process, and that's pretty special, isn't it, Alex?
It really is, and I wanted to particularly single out Tony Ryder, who for many years has been our Twitter buddy, and have great conversations with her about different things going on in the race. And I always gain a lot of insight from her. And also Helen Hegener, who runs a couple of the Mushing Facebook groups, and just always is, during the race, is finding and posting stories, and just is really doing a great service for people who are fans of the race. So I want to particularly thank those two.
I do too. And if I am correct, Alex, this is your and I's 10th year doing that. Is that right?
I don't know. Is that right?
It could be. When was your documentary?
It feels like it's been 10 years just since the beginning of this race, to be honest.
When was your documentary released?
2010.
Okay, yeah. So this is our 10th. This is our 10th Iditarod. We've done something together on Iditarod, and I guess it was 8 or 9 years ago we started doing our daily coverage. But I remember that first time meeting you there in the Beartooth Theater for the premiere of your show, and it's amazing that we've done this for so long together, and hopefully we have a few more years left in us.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was thinking back to how it feels like I just knew so little about mushing back then. I had a lot of things that interested me, but I think about all of the things that I've learned from you, from a lot of other mushers, from a lot of fans, and it's just, you stick around long enough and you start learning things.
You do, and if you get lucky, you get to take a ride on a sled, and if that works well, it's definitely a bucket list item. If it does not work well, you have some really interesting stories and memories, don't you?
Yes, absolutely.
But you have your battle scars. That's what's important. For folks that don't know, on Alex's first big run on a dog sled, he was on our team, and he was doing awesome. And about 2 miles from the house, he took a nasty spill, and we thought that he just separated his shoulder, not a big deal. We'll put it back into place here at the house, and that ended up turning into a year-long odyssey, didn't it?
Yeah, and I was doing great right up until the time that I wasn't.
And that's typical mushing. If you've never been on a dog sled, that is 100% typical. You could be having the time of your life, and your foot slips, or you let go of the handlebars the wrong way, and it can turn into a interesting ride for sure. So Alex, what happens? Tell our fans what happens in the off season. We keep it going, don't we?
Yeah. So we, and the off season is starting earlier this year because basically everything else after this, all the other races have been canceled. But we have done shows and keep tabs on people and do musher interviews and talk about training and all sorts of things happening off season. And whenever there's news, like a few years ago when there was all that news with the Dallas CV dogs testing positive for a banned substance, we did a bunch of shows about that, and we just we keep plugged into the world of mushing even outside of Iditarod.
We do, and for folks that are listening, we are the only show, I believe, in the world that is on terrestrial radio still. You can drive down the highway here in the Matsu Valley and turn it to KVRF 89.7 and hear an honest-to-goodness mushing radio show. And that's pretty special. We have to give a shout-out to Mike over there, the program manager and the head honcho. It's just a really small public radio station, and he's been with us since pretty much the very beginning. And without him, I think we would have a heck of a lot less listeners than we have, because he promotes the heck out of us, and he puts us on the radio where airtime is precious, whether you're a really small station like him or one of the big guys like Alaska Public Media, where they do their own podcast now. But we have to give a shout out to him for sure. And lastly, definitely all of our friends and fans over on social media. You're much more active on Twitter than I am. But we've had a lot of back and forth. So to end this, Alex, how can folks follow you on social media, and what do you talk about on there when you're not talking about mushing?
Yeah, so the easiest way people can look for me on Facebook at Alex M. Stein, or on Twitter at Coldfoot Films. And, I try and probably fail not to talk about politics. I talk about politics a little bit. I talk a lot about storytelling and a lot about movies. So yeah, people can find me there, and hopefully, we'll stay connected with all of these people, all of these great people that follow us and that have been, especially the new followers.
And you can find me on social media by searching Robert Forto, Forto. And when I'm not talking about Iditarod or mushing, I am typically, especially in the summertime, talking about my wife Michelle and I's travels around the country, where we go what we call the rock and roller tour. We head down south and we hit up rock and roll festivals and roller coasters, and we kind of hit that road trip. I don't know if that's going to happen this year, Alex, with everything that's happening, but boy, it's going to be different to see how the off season works. So the next big event, folks, that follow mushing, and we're going to end on this, is the Iditarod picnic that happens the last Saturday in June. And that is the first day that folks can sign up, and typically they'll have 10, 15, 20 people sign up. And the reason that they do is they draw, I believe it's 2 people out of a hat or something, and they get a free entry, and that's a $4,000 entry. So if they sign up early, it is a good way to potentially get your money back, and that's sort of the start of the Iditarod year. And then as we move forward throughout the summer, things kind of calm down a little bit, and then typically around the 1st of October is when everybody starts signing up for the qualifying races, and there's always training news that's happening and new people coming on the scene, and that's when people get really active on social media. And then we talk about those qualifying races as we move into December and January. Then we talk about the Quest in February, and then we're right back where we started, talking about the Iditarod right before the first Saturday in March. So with that, Alex, I really appreciate you taking the time this last couple of weeks and doing your part. We definitely could not do it without you, all of your research gathering and all that. It's great to have you on, and great to call you a colleague and a friend for sure. And I really appreciate it, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, if I could just say one more thing,
yes,
which is that if I know that there's likely to be some economic shocks that are happening for all of us, and people who are interested in supporting mushers. A lot of mushers do kennel tours. A lot of mushers do sled dog tours. Hopefully, when things calm down, if you're in a position to do so, you should seek out mushers that you like, mushers that you want to work with, and patronize them in any way you can. Also, I know, Robert, you do dog training and a variety of other things, and I would encourage people to support you, who, in that sense, who have dogs that need training, or if you need a service dog or something like that. and people who are interested in storytelling or want to hire me to write something should please do that as well. It's going to be a bit of a difficult time, I think, ahead for a lot of people. But I'm confident that we'll all get through it. And one of the things that I've learned from mushers and from people who run dog sled races is that you need to take these things one step at a time, and you need to have an overall plan, but be flexible enough so you can roll with the changes when they come through. And finally, and I think most importantly, as we see every year on the Iditarod Trail, in one form or another, it's important to be aware of other people and do what you can to support them and to help them. And especially in the next few months, I think that's going to be very important for all of us. So, I understand that a lot of people are going to have difficult times, but please do what you can.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Alex. On behalf of my co-host, Alex Stein, this is Robert Forto, and this concludes our 2020 Iditarod coverage here on Mushing Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for Dogworks Radio. Did you know that Alaska Dogworks trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dogworks on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.